Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Antics School Edition. I'm going to be starting a series where I just get adults, teachers around campus to participate in the show at Attic Antics. So today I'm here with none other than the man himself, Mr. Mason.
Hello.
Alrighty, Mr. Mason. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
So, you have one of the happiest personalities I have ever come across in my years. And I don't mean to put you, make you feel awkward or anything, but I genuinely want to know what drives you. What fuels this positive energy that you have?
Interesting. I guess it's my outlook on life. I am very lucky. I just consider myself a very lucky person. I'm, so far healthy. I've had a very easy life. I've not had a tremendous number of struggles or difficulties. I've been able to pursue what I've wanted to pursue. I'm able to teach what I like. I'm able to research into what I like. I'm happy at home. My life goes well. I mean, I'm sure, there are always ups and downs. I'm sure there are times when I'm, if you would see me outside a classroom, I'm maybe not the most happy guy in the world. But I think it basically stems from the fact that my outlook is one of, I'm happy and grateful that things are going as easily as they are for me. Because I look around the world and I see that lots of people have it very, very difficult, and I realize that I'm very lucky.
That's awesome. Very cool. All right, now we're going to switch it to a nicer thing. Have you ever been stung by a jellyfish?
Yes, many times.
Can you tell us what that's like?
Many times. Now, probably the one that people have heard about is the Portuguese man-o-war. Mm-hmm. So I've been stung a few times by those, and they're very painful.
Oh, jeez.
But it all depends on how much tentacle you get on you. Mm-hmm. And I've never had a whole bunch. So those can be really, quite severe. But I've had small little tips of tentacles brushed by me. So, rash, stinging, pain, several hours, maybe a couple of days, and on. I never had anything that required medical attention, so it's never been horrible, just been more of an inconvenience.
Very interesting. All right, so Mr. Mason, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I grew up here in the Bay Area. So I was born in Hayward, and I was raised in Newark. Awesome. So, which is, just 25 minutes away from here.
Cool.
And I went to high school in Newark, went to college in Hayward at Cal State East Bay, and over at San Francisco State. So even though I've moved out of the state from time to time for a year here, 6 months there, I've moved around a little bit, but home is definitely the Bay Area.
So where have you moved?
I worked in Mexico for a little while.
Oh, really?
Spent a lot of time in Mexico. I worked in the Bahamas for a little while, lived there. Oh, wow. Those were I lived, it's the United States, but I lived in Hawaii for a while.
Wow.
Those are the places
really
I've
cool.
lived, yeah.
What's been your favorite place to live out of those?
Actually, no, I think probably the Bahamas. I really enjoy the Bahamas.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Bahamas? What were you doing there?
Well, I was working for a resort called Club Med, and I taught snorkeling and was in charge of putting on picnics.
That's dope.
And so it was pretty chill, pretty relaxed job. Mm-hmm. And the weather's great, the water's incredible. I got to snorkel and scuba dive every day. I taught people how to snorkel.
That's so cool.
And so, I mean, the people are really, really friendly, and I just it took me about 3 hours to convert to island life, and then I never wanted to go back. Really.
Nice, I bet. So then, what made you go back? Just real life?
Yeah. I had to go back to school. I had to get things done. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you for a minute about how you curated your love for oceans. Do you think that you grew up in Hayward, which is pretty close to the ocean, compared to, say, Indiana or something?
Yeah.
So what do you think that your ease of access to the oceans inspired the love, or like what in your life created that such a love?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've just always been the type of person who is drawn to nature. So I've always, loved camping when I was a little kid, 4 or 5, 6 years old, fishing, hiking. Just being out in nature has always been a love of mine. And I would always watch the television shows. Like when I was young, it was Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and the odd Jacques Cousteau special on TV. So I was always watching those and real excited about, the cool things that they showed in the ocean. And then when I was 14, my older brother, who was in his 20s, invited me to take a scuba diving course with him. So I've got scuba certified at 14, and once I was able to dive, well, then it just crystallized everything.
Where did you first dive at?
Monterey was the first place, yeah.
Is the water, is it hard to see? Is it hard to see down there?
Monterey is, it's cold, so you have to have a pretty thick wetsuit on.
Definitely.
And then the visibility is really changeable. I mean, I've been diving many times where, if I stuck my arm out in front of it would be hard to see my hand.
Wow.
But there are other times when you've got, 40 feet or 50 feet of visibility. But usually more like 20, 25 feet of visibility. So it's nothing like the tropics. But there's so much life in our area here that, it makes up for the fact that you can't see all over.
Now, when you dive and you can't see 5 feet in front of you, is there any fear that goes on there? Or if there was, how did you get over that fear?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've always
known... The oceans are pretty big.
Yeah, I've always known there were sharks. I mean, here in California, it's not much that's going to hurt you. I mean, other than a big great white or something.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I was able to just kind of push that aside. I guess it was the excitement. I would just stick my head down next to a rock and just sort of take half an hour and work my way around a boulder, and there would be, hundreds of different kinds of animals and algae and things there. And so I was able to just totally immerse myself in what I was doing.
Cool. So, going back to the question of your love for the oceans, so you feel... was scuba diving really a factor that played into just how amazing the rest of this world is that you haven't seen?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I mean, it's one thing to see things on television, and like if you see the British documentaries now and stuff, especially, I mean, the filming is so beautiful, and it's great, but there's nothing like seeing it like in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that just takes it to another level.
How long did you live in Hawaii for?
A little over a year. I was waiting. I had graduated college, and I had applied to some grad schools, and so I wasn't going to hear back for like 6 months or so. And so I thought, why not?
Oh my god, that's so
there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you? Were you working there?
Yeah, I worked at a hotel, the Ritz-Carlton.
Nice.
I just grabbed an old job.
On which island?
On the Big Island of Hawaii.
For sure. Wow, they got some great scuba diving
down
there.
Yeah, it was really
Oh
nice.
my goodness.
They had a deal where if you were a local, a couple of the dive companies would allow you to go for, a really reduced rate if they had openings. Like, so they would, obviously if tourists were paying full fare, they got first priority, but if there were any spots on the boats, they'd let you go for like, 30-40% of
That's awesome.
Normal. So it was good.
Cool. So Mr. Mason, when I took your class last year, the unit that you pretty much start the class off with is about plastics in the ocean.
Yeah, I moved that around a little bit. I didn't do that this year, but I usually start with, why the oceans are important. And then in that first semester, we talk about various environmental challenges that the oceans are facing. And plastic's definitely one of them, yeah.
Say coral bleaching and everything. So, do you mind explaining what coral bleaching is?
Yeah, well, coral in the tropics, there's not a lot of plankton in most areas around the reef. Most of the little guys, the photosynthetic organisms, are actually living in the coral, and so bleaching is when those little zooxanthellae, the little tiny photosynthetic organisms, leave or are kicked out by the coral, and that happens when the corals get stressed. And one of the major reasons for that is climate change and warming ocean water temperatures. But it could be disease, it could be, there are a number of stressors that could cause these little tiny single-celled algae to leave the coral. But when they do, the coral loses their color, and then we say the coral is bleached. And so that's what happens there. Yeah.
Do you know of any statistics offhand about like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia or around the world of how much it's impacted the oceans?
Well, the Great Barrier Reef has lost over half of its coral in the last 30 years.
Wow.
So, and that's a huge, actually series of reefs. So they've lost over half. And that's not all due to bleaching, but a significant part is due to bleaching. I can't remember exactly offhand what percentage, but the top three things that are killers are the crown of thorns starfish, the bleaching, and weather events like hurricanes, cyclones, things
Definitely.
Like that.
Yeah. That article about the crown of thorns, that was a big shock to me. I showed my parents about that when I got home, and they were like, "What the hell are these monstrous creatures? They're crazy." All right, and we're back. Just took the Save the Bay Club's picture, and now we're back talking about the crown of thorns.
Crown of thorns is a really big, spiky starfish, and it seems crazy to think that they could have such. Oops. Can edit that out?
Yeah, I'll try.
It's crazy to think that they can have a really big effect, like a sea
Yeah.
star. It's just an invertebrate, right? It's just a little. But their numbers get so big, and they literally just push their stomach out and digest coral, as they go. And when their numbers get really big, they cause a lot of damage on the coral reefs. So they're
because of how tied the coral reefs are to the whole ocean's ecosystem, right?
Yeah, it seems like there's no absolute certainty, but right now it seems like there's a pretty good chance that the reasons that these starfish populations just go through the roof certain times might have something to do with nutrient pollution. All the nutrients we're putting into the water allow the larvae, first allow the phytoplankton to increase in numbers, and that's more food for the little babies, and so more baby starfish settle down, and so more of them survive, and that becomes an issue.
Definitely. So, Mr. Mason, do you eat seafood?
I do not. I eat no seafood, and I probably wouldn't eat it. But because at least certain types, because I know there are a lot of things that are overfished. A lot of fish are overfished. Lobster, a lot of things are overfished. But as I try and show my class, as long as the fishing is sustainable, as long as it's the animals are fished in such a way where they're allowed to reproduce and the populations are allowed to continue, I don't have any problem with eating seafood. I just generally don't like the taste. So that's
perfectly valid.
Yeah, those my taste buds, anything sort of fishy, not okay with me.
For sure. All right, I want to do a segment where we talk about your favorite things.
My favorite things.
Your
All right.
favorite things. So we're going to start off with your favorite book.
My favorite book. Wow. That's hard. That's like asking your favorite movie. There's so many.
Yeah.
I would say... Well, I'll start with authors, okay? Mm-hmm. I'll start with John Steinbeck.
Absolutely.
He's one of my favorites.
One of the greats.
So, Cannery Row is one of my favorite books.
I had that written on there.
Sweet Thursday, the sort of, what he wrote after that as a sort of continuation is one of my favorite. The Winter of Our Discontent by Steinbeck is another one that I like a lot. I also like, let's see, I like Russian writers. I like Dostoevsky. I like Crime and Punishment. I like Yeah, I'll stick with the Russians and Steinbeck.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite character from Cannery Row?
It'd have to be the Doc.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
The Doc just seems like, I think Steinbeck was trying to make Doc
he was awesome.
Yeah, he was part real person because it was a real person and a real good friend of Steinbeck's, but he kind of, canonized him a little bit and made him into almost a perfect person.
When I read that book, I felt like I knew those guys.
Yeah.
I felt like I was just like hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Like that's just my thing on Cannery Row.
Yeah.
Great recommendation. Glad you suggested it. All right, now, what is your favorite marine mammal?
Favorite marine mammal? Boy, let's see. I'm gonna go with the beluga whale.
The beluga whale. Do you mind telling us why?
I don't know. I just think it's so bizarre looking and interesting in the way it talks and uses its sound. And I was able to see one a couple years ago when I went to Alaska.
Wow.
And they're just bizarre. I mean, there's a lot of great marine mammals, but that's the first one that came to my mind.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite bird?
Favorite bird? Wow. Keel-billed toucan.
Keel-billed toucan.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Or there are a number of a family of bird called the birds of paradise.
Oh yeah.
And they're very, very cool. So I'll go with those.
Do you have a favorite beach that comes to mind?
Favorite beach?
Could be California. Could be out of the United States. Favorite beach?
Boy, there was one in the Bahamas. I was in the Bahamas this last summer. There's one in the Bahamas on, trying to remember the name of it there, that I thought was particularly nice. Let me get back to you.
Okay, cool. Any California beaches that come
beaches
come to mind?
San Diego.
It's off the Chisang, huh?
Yeah, it's just fantastic. So there are a couple of places. But these are beaches. Mainly, I don't go to beaches to lay out. Mm-hmm. I go to beaches that have good low tides, and I go out to go tide pooling.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite tide pooling spot?
So, like Bird Rock in San Diego is really cool.
Killer.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. Also, I'm going next week to Asilomar in Monterey. It's another good one. Carmel Beach is really good for that. So, yeah, those are good.
Cool. Do you have a favorite country that you visit? I know you're a traveling man.
A traveling man, I don't know. I think Australia was one of my favorites.
Nice.
It would definitely be between Australia and Africa. I know it's not a country, but when I went to Africa, that was East Africa. That was really nice, just because the animal life was so incredible.
Nice. Very cool, very cool. I'm going to ask you a pretty vague question.
All right.
I just want to see your answer. Is there something that you could have picked out in your life as the most beautiful thing you have ever seen? Is there any one thing?
Wow. So many things to choose from. I have to go with my old favorites. I mean, there are certain nudibranch species, like Nembothra, the sometimes referred to as the jolly green giant, which is an orange and green and black nudibranch that I just find stunning. So I'll have to go with the nudibranchs.
Awesome. And we only have about 3 minutes remaining. So I just want you to hear out a couple of my ideas, and then I just want you to finish it with some info about some nudibranchs. Double-decker highways.
Double-decker highways?
You don't have to respond. Aloe plants on the beach.
Very nice.
All right, that's it. So, Mr. Mason, you are an avid nudibranch researcher.
Yes.
How long have you been researching nudibranchs for?
Since the late 1980s. So what does that make it? Like 30 4 or 5 years.
What draws you so much to the nudibranch species?
I don't know.
Or is it a species or is
it's an order?
Okay.
It's a group. That's a really good question. What draws you? I mean, definitely it's the aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that drew me was the visuals, all the bright colors, the incredible forms. So that was definitely one. But then you start to learn about them, and you think they look like, they're very small. They're usually just a few centimeters or less. They're slugs. So you would think there's not all that much to them, but their behaviors, the way that they make a living in the ocean, it's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot to learn from the way they do their thing. So that keeps me coming back.
That's awesome. Yeah, you start your class out with a bang with all those microscopes and all the animals that you have to identify. There really is so much to the ocean. So I'll end it with this final question.
Yeah.
I would love to have you back on to have a more in-depth discussion about these things. However, I will end it with this. Do you think we know more about the ocean or space?
That's a really good question. You always hear we know more about, the moon than we do about the depths of the ocean. Mm-hmm. But I think the moon, there's no life on the moon. Mm-hmm. So we certainly can find out a lot about the geology of the moon and that. But I think there's so much more to the oceans. There's so much more to learn. There's so much more to find out because of the incredible variety that lives in the ocean. And we've been doing that now for a pretty long time, and we're a long way from knowing even close to half of what there is to know. But I think we're building up a pretty good reservoir of knowledge. So I'm going to go with we know more about the oceans.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mason.
Good.
I appreciate you
Cameron, I'm glad to do it. Glad to do it.
It's incredible.
All right. Good. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Okay.